you know what the best example of power pitcher versus finesse is? I'll do a little name dropping. One time when I was early in my career, I used to hit with Barry Bonds, and it was as cool as it sounds. I mean, I was just a low A ball player. He had no business being this nice to me because he would come and hit at UCLA, and he would occasionally hit with me when I was in college at UCLA. But I had no thought that he would even remember who I was. And I was just hitting in the cage one day. He comes in with Dexter Fowler, and he's working with Dex, and he just sees me over there, and he says, Decker, get over here. One, Barry Bonds knew my name. I melted. It was the greatest moment of my life. And I went over there and I hit with Barry Bonds, and he made sure I hit with him every day. And he started talking about baseball, and hearing hitting from Barry Bonds is just spectacular. But he described this exact scenario, power pitchers versus finesse pitchers. And he said, you know, who's the best pitcher I ever faced, and it's not even close talent-wise? He's like, Mark Pryor. He's the best pitcher I ever saw. Never saw anyone like him. He just could do everything. And I owned him. He was the easiest guy for me to face. And he's like, because right up here, I knew what he had. He was a little softer than the next guy. But here, he had way more than everybody else. And he's like, then you face Greg Maddox. He's like, Greg Maddox made me do exactly what Greg Maddox wanted me to do every single time. He was the only smart pitcher in baseball, and he just sat there at 86, and he was going to get me to ground out to second base like it was his job, and it was. So he just talked about how a finesse pitcher who truly can control the ball can do whatever they want. The problem is, those are the true once-in-a-generation type players. I mean, I know we look at the Shohei Ohtanis and the Garrett Coles who are sitting at 102, but the once-in-a-generation guy is the guy who can throw 91 and own you.
So I just pulled up Bonds against Maddox in his career, and he held his own. He had 260. Maddox won that, right? He held him to 260, and I think like 8 home runs in like 154 plate appearances. That's a win for Maddox. If you hold Barry Bonds to that, you've won. You know, it's funny as you told that story. It's kind of a shame that the average fan doesn't think of Bonds. Like, obviously, you knew him on a little bit of a personal level there in that story, but he's just considered a jerk and a bad guy. No one ever talks about he's probably the smartest hitter since Ted Williams, right? Like, if you're making a list of the smartest hitters ever, it's Ted Williams and then probably Barry Bonds. Like, he zoned in on, like, he was the smartest hitter I've ever watched, and no one ever talks about him like that because no one likes him.
And it's amazing to me because you hear all these stories about what a jerk Barry Bonds. Again, I was a nobody. I wasn't playing for the Giants organization. This guy just was so kind to me, and I learned a ton from him. And it was incredible experience. And even Dusty Baker had a list where he said the best hitters he had ever been around, smartest hitters. He put the list as Reggie Smith and Barry Bonds and Sammy Sosa. Those 3 guys knew more about how to hit a baseball than just about anyone on the planet. And Barry Bonds, I mean, you hear people, if you watch on like social media, there's a lot of arguments when it comes to hitting mechanics for whatever reason. Everyone thinks they have the answer. There's a lot of hitting gurus out there that are always talking about launch. If you hear a hitting coach talking about launch angle, walk out of the room. Just don't even talk to this person, because Barry Bonds, the greatest power hitter who ever lived, I hit in the cage with him every day for 6 months. This guy never hit the ceiling of the cage once. Nothing but line drives. That's all he worked on. And he would pinpoint the line drives. All right, this one's going to go 6 inches to the right of the second baseman. Line drive perfectly. All right, this one I'm going to hit perfectly between left fielder and right fielder, probably about 12 feet off the ground. Perfect. It was magical to the point where I'm like, I don't know if I can hit this. I don't know if I can hit like this. I don't know if I can make it to the big leagues, because Barry Bonds is literally taking pitches saying, I'm going to hit it within inches of where he's trying to hit it. I can hit it close, but inches? Maybe off the tee. Maybe. Big maybe.
Yeah, that story reminds me of like when you go watch before a basketball game, like Steph Curry hitting from half court, just shooting, right? Just like normal, like just like shot after shot. When I was a kid, I watched a Red Sox game. Wade Boggs was still there, and I watched him take batting practice. Wade Boggs, he hit 10 consecutive. I'll never forget this. I was a kid, but like he was taking batting practice, and you could tell he was aiming for the hole between short and third base. He hit it in that same spot 10 times in a row. Like, he just hit the ball wherever he wanted. Like, those guys are like aliens. Most guys can't do that. I mean, it's just like, that's impossible. And yet these guys are like, yeah, I'm going to hit the ball right there every time.
You know, Aaron, you being a Seattle person, you might get a kick out of this, because I've always heard this. It's never been like confirmed by my own eyes, but I've been told this by about 6 players and coaches who always say the person who would have been the best home run derby player of all time and never would have lost was Ichiro Suzuki. Everyone flat out admits Ichiro only didn't hit 40 or 50 home runs a year because he chose not to. That's apparently how good and pinpoint accuracy his bat was. He just chose to play a different game, but apparently in BP, he would sit there in batting practice, be like, all right, I'll hit this in the second deck. 3 seats to the right over there. He was like that insane. And watching Ichiro play for as long, it doesn't surprise me at all.
I actually haven't heard that story, but I wouldn't be surprised either. I forgot about Ichiro. Man, he was a staple in Seattle for years. I always think about Ken Griffey Jr. when I think about, the Mariners a long time ago. And well done with the Ichiro. Yeah, he was fun to watch. Really.
Yeah, there are just some guys who can control the bat in ways that are just staggering. Just staggering. And it's not unlike a finesse pitcher being able to control the ball they do. It's a certain type of, like you said, it's alien. I mean, every player in the big leagues right now is astonishing. Every single one of them. The very worst player in the big leagues right now is an astonishing athlete and baseball player. You have to be otherworldly to be able to be spoken about the way we speak about Barry Bonds, Ichiro Suzuki. The guys that can just do what they want on command in this game doesn't happen.